Why your brain replays embarrassing moments from years ago. Master Key B V 2.0 Mass Stage 1. Final narration 151 sentences. You are about to fall asleep when your brain suddenly remembers the time you said, "You too," after a waiter said, "Enjoy your meal." Your eyes open in the dark. Your body reacts as if a tiny social emergency has just happened again. Then your mind gets ambitious. It finds the meeting where you answered too confidently and were completely wrong. It finds the party where your joke landed in total silence. It finds the message you sent at 12:03 a.m. and regretted at 12:04. Some of these moments are 5, 10, or 15 years old. Nobody has called to discuss them. There is no new evidence. There is not even a problem you can still fix. So why does your brain keep reopening a case that everyone else seems to have closed? The first surprise is that the replay may not be about the event itself. It may be about what the event seemed to reveal about you. Embarrassment is a social emotion, so the painful question is often not simply, "What did I do?" The painful question is, "What did they see when I did it?" Maybe they saw you as awkward. Maybe they saw you as needy, boring, clueless, overeager, or desperate to be liked. For a few seconds, your behavior collided with the person you wanted to appear to be. That collision can give an otherwise ordinary memory a special kind of emotional charge. Your mind can start treating it less like old footage and more like information about social danger. And information about social danger can feel worth reviewing. But here is where the mystery gets more interesting. The version of the event you replay is not the same thing as the event that actually happened. You remember your sentence, but you also imagine the meaning of everyone's silence. You remember one person's face, but you may fill in what that face supposedly meant. You remember feeling exposed, and that feeling can make the whole room seem more focused on you than it really was. Psychologists have a name for one bias that helps explain this: the spotlight effect. In a classic experiment, people wearing an embarrassing t-shirt overestimated how many other people would notice and remember it. That does not mean nobody ever notices your awkward moments. It means your own experience of the moment is much louder to you than it is to everyone watching. You were inside the embarrassment. They were also inside their own day. You remember the exact sentence because it threatened your self-image. The person across the room may have been thinking about where to stand, what to say next, or whether they look strange too. This creates a brutal asymmetry. You can carry a high-definition memory of your mistake while other people carry, at most, a blurry background detail. And yet your brain may keep using your own vividness as evidence that the moment must have been vivid for them too. That is one reason an old memory can still feel socially dangerous long after the social situation is gone. Then the replay itself can become a loop. A present-day cue wakes up the memory. Maybe somebody uses the same phrase you used that night. Maybe you enter a similar meeting room. Maybe your mind is simply quiet enough for old material to surface. The memory appears. You feel the cringe. The cringe creates an urge to inspect what went wrong. So you replay the scene. You change your answer. You invent a better joke. You imagine a calmer version of yourself walking through the same moment perfectly. For a few seconds, this mental editing can feel useful. It creates a small sense of control over something that once felt out of control. And this is the part that makes the loop so stubborn. The replay can feel like problem solving, even when there is no longer a problem available to solve. Psychologists often call this kind of detailed review after a social event post-event processing. Research links more negative post-event processing with harsher self-evaluation and social anxiety, especially in people already prone to fearing negative evaluation. That does not mean replaying an embarrassing memory means you have an anxiety disorder. It means a normal habit of reviewing social mistakes can become unhelpful when the review keeps producing judgment without producing new information. The short-term reward is not pleasure. The short-term reward is the feeling that you are doing something about the discomfort. But the past does not update when you finally think of the perfect sentence. Only your attention updates. And every time the memory receives another emergency meeting, your mind gets another reason to treat it as important. This is the contradiction at the center of the replay. You review the moment because you want to make sure it never matters again. but the act of repeatedly reviewing it can keep signaling that it still matters. You can test whether this is happening without diagnosing yourself or trying to force the memory away. The next time an old cringe scene appears, ask what your mind is actually doing with it. Are you remembering a fact? Or are you estimating what other people thought? Are you learning something new? Or are you generating a better performance for an audience that no longer exists? Are you viewing the scene through your own eyes? Or are you watching yourself from the outside like a disappointed judge? Are you trying to understand what happened? Or are you trying to make the feeling of embarrassment disappear? Those questions separate memory from mental prosecution. And the difference matters because the prosecution can continue forever. There is always one more facial expression to reinterpret. There is always one more sentence you could have said better. There is always one more imaginary witness whose opinion you can never actually verify. That is why some embarrassing memories feel unfinished even when the event itself is completely finished. Your mind is not only replaying what happened, it may be trying to reach certainty about how you were seen, and certainty about another person's private judgment is usually impossible to obtain years later. Now comes a deeper reveal. Sometimes the memory hurts more today precisely because you are not the same person you were then. You now know the joke was badly timed. You now know you were oversharing because you were nervous. You now know the confident answer in that meeting was based on something you had misunderstood. Your current self has information, experience, and social awareness that your past self did not have yet. That should make the old moment easier to understand. Instead, it can make the old version of you look even more unbearable. You judge a beginner using the standards of the person who already learned the lesson. That is a little like laughing at an old map, because it does not contain roads that were built later. The map was incomplete, but so was the world available to it. This creates one of the strangest forms of cringe. Your growth becomes evidence for the prosecution. The fact that you would handle the situation differently now becomes proof that the old you was unacceptable. But there is another interpretation hiding in exactly the same evidence. If the old behavior feels foreign to you now, that may be evidence that something actually changed. The cringe is not always proof that the old moment still defines you. Sometimes it is proof that it no longer fits you. That distinction changes what the memory is for. Instead of asking, "How could I have been that person?" you can ask, "What did that person not know yet?" That question does not excuse harmful behavior or erase consequences. It turns the memory from a verdict into information, and information has a natural stopping point once the lesson is clear. You can see the same mechanism in very different scenes. A person remembers freezing during a presentation and keeps replaying the 3 seconds before their mind went blank. Another remembers being too eager on a first date and mentally rewrites every sentence on the drive home for years afterward. Someone else remembers saying the wrong name in class and still feels heat in their face whenever the memory appears. The surface details change, but the hidden question is similar. What did that moment say about me, and could people still see me that way? Notice how easily that question turns one event into an identity statement. I said something awkward becomes I am awkward. I wanted approval becomes I am pathetic. I misunderstood something becomes I am stupid. A 5-second behavior gets promoted into a permanent biography. That promotion is often far more painful than the original mistake. So here is a small experiment for the next replay. Do not start by telling yourself, "Stop thinking about it." Attempts to suppress a thought can sometimes make the thought rebound or remain unusually noticeable. Instead, give the replay a job description. Say, "My mind is reviewing an old social mistake because it wants to prevent a repeat." Then write one sentence containing only what a camera could have recorded. For example, "I made a joke, nobody laughed for a few seconds, and the conversation moved on." Next, write one sentence containing the story your mind added. For example, "Everyone realized I was painfully awkward and probably remembered it for years." Now look at the distance between those two sentences. The first may contain evidence. The second may contain interpretation, prediction, and mind reading mixed together. Then ask one final question. Is there a lesson here that would change what I do next time? Maybe the lesson is to pause before sending the extra message. Maybe it is to say, I don't know, instead of bluffing through an answer. Maybe it is simply to accept that being socially smooth every second is an impossible performance standard. If there is a useful lesson, keep it in one sentence. You do not need the entire courtroom transcript to remember one sentence. And if there is no new lesson, notice what the replay is actually producing. It may be producing pain without producing information. That is a very different activity from learning. The goal is not to convince yourself that the moment was secretly charming. Some embarrassing moments really were embarrassing. The goal is to stop confusing embarrassment with an ongoing emergency. So tonight, when your brain suddenly premieres the director's cut of something awkward you did in 2014, notice the trick. The memory may feel current because your body remembers the social threat, your mind can still imagine the audience, and the replay still promises one more chance to get the scene right. But you are not standing in that room anymore. You are standing years later with information the old version of you did not have. The most useful question may not be, how do I make this memory disappear? It may be, has this memory already taught me everything it knows? If the answer is yes, you can keep the lesson without continuing the trial. Because sometimes, the reason you cringe at who you were is not that you are still that person. It is that you have finally become someone who can see the difference.